Today I want to talk about intermittent fasting. And yes, I know there's a load of information out there on YouTube, on blogs, articles, books, you name it, it's everywhere. And I'm definitely not an expert. I am not a nutritionist. So why do I want to talk about intermittent fasting? Because I bloody well want to. So let's get into that. But before that, we'll get to this thing. Alright, so intermittent fasting. Just before we get back to all the magical stuff, I wanted to cover this. And there's a few reasons for it actually. One, I'm doing intermittent fasting at the moment, finding it to be fantastic. Two, it's very good for you. Three, from a magical perspective, it's very good. And why, from a magical perspective, for a magic user to actually be aware of these things. Mostly, if you consider magic is about mastering self. And in order to master self, you have to master the whole of yourself. Before Damo actually got to the Shaolin Temple, back in the day, the Shaolin monks actually, they completely and utterly rejected the body. So they just considered the body not to be that important because, enlightenment was about the mind and everything else. So their bodies were actually in a terrible state and degenerating. And then he got there and he went into a cave for 9 years or something and came out with all of the practices, introduced Qigong, Gung Fu, etc., etc. And so there was this whole thing about bringing balance between the body and the mind and the spirit. And again, magic is about bringing balance into your life in all aspects. So when it comes to magic, looking after the body as much as the mind and the spirit and the emotions is just as important. They're all important. You can't just, reject one and expect the other one to actually flourish. Because if you want a clear mind, if you want a good mind, if you want a powerful mind, and you want to be able to control your emotions and things like that, then you also need to look after your body. Your body needs to be mastered at the same time as mastering your mind. I think you get the general idea. So this is why I'm talking about this instead of just magic. Because it does become very important to the whole process, to your whole magical life in general. And if you notice, I got some green stuff. I like green stuff. It looks nice. Makes it look cool. Anyway, so intermittent fasting. So I have now been doing it for a week. So it's still early days, so I'll report more in the future. But what I wanted to say was that I started last Tuesday. Friday I had a day off. I ate too early, and then by 8 o'clock I was starving. I needed something to eat, so that was just a messed up day really for the whole thing. So I started Tuesday and I weighed myself on Saturday morning. So in effect it was just 3 days of intermittent fasting, with Friday being a boo-boo. But on Saturday morning, I weighed myself, I'd lost 1 kilo. So even just those 3 days, it could be coincidence, it could be other factors, water retention, things like that, because obviously with the fasting, I'm drinking more water as well, which I should have been doing anyway, but, we get lazy and we don't do these things. But I did lose 1 kilo, so I'm sticking to it this week. So I'll weigh myself again on Saturday morning and see what the results are. But as far as weight loss goes, just the logic behind the whole thing actually makes sense, which I'm going to go through now, through all the little sciencey bits, because it's extremely interesting. But not just from a weight loss point of view, from a health point of view. you'll see when I go through all this that it reduces the fatty content within your body, which would obviously help your heart. It lowers blood pressure. So if you've got high blood pressure problems, it'll help with that. So it's a health benefit as well. And it gives you more energy. It makes you clearer. You're able to concentrate more and be more productive. So there's a lot of benefits to actually intermittent fasting. I'm not going to say it will work for everybody. And obviously there are some people that need to go to the doctor before they consider doing intermittent fasting, especially if you have insulin problems, because there is something that happens with the insulin, obviously. And if you do have insulin problems, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert, so I can't say whether you can or can't. Go to your doctor, find out first. If they say yes, go for it. I will say the first few days are not that easy. You've obviously got the habit of, I've got the habit of waking up in the morning and first thing I do is switch the kettle on. Well, apart from going for a pee first. But then I switch the kettle on and I make a cup of coffee. That's the first thing I do. It's habit. So getting out of those habits can be a bit difficult. So 3-4 days, it's a bit of a challenge. But after that, it's actually quite easy. And replacing your coffee or your juice, your soda drinks, whatever you drink with water, it's not that difficult. And if you actually are a coffee drinker and you like black coffee with no sugar and milk, then drink coffee because it's actually very, very good for you, especially with the intermittent fasting. It actually stimulates the autophagy stage. I love the concept of autophagy, but I'll get to that as well. But I have found, especially, I noticed it this morning actually, between the hours of the 11th and the 12th hour of the fasting period, I'm very hungry. My stomach's growling and gurgling and everything else, and it definitely wants food. But somewhere between the 13th and the 14th hour, all that hunger just disappears. So I can actually go on. I'm going to actually increase it by an hour next week. Doing 14-hour fast at the moment each day. So I'm going to increase it to 15 hours next week and see how that goes and get more benefit out of the autophagy stage. So anyway, let's go through the sciencey bits because it's very interesting. So after you have your last meal, for the next 3 hours, your blood sugar levels actually rise because this is when your digestive process actually starts. So what happens is the carbs from the meal actually get processed and released into the bloodstream as glucose, and so that increases your blood glucose level, which increases your blood sugar level, and the body starts to produce insulin. Now, insulin is very important for the body for two main reasons. So the first reason is it stimulates the absorption of blood sugar into tissues, which gives a quick burst of energy. So you'll notice after you've eaten, especially if you've had something sugary, you get that sudden burst of energy. But then after a while, that actually just dies off very quickly. So it's a quick high and a quick low. But the insulin also stores energy. The reason it actually stores energy is because the body doesn't need all of the energy that's produced. So the insulin actually stimulates the conversion of glucose into what's called glycogen. And the glycogen is stored in the liver and the muscles, and then it's released when energy is needed. But when the glycogen stores are full, then the excess energy actually gets stored in fatty tissue in the form of fat. Now, after 3 hours, between the third and the 9th hour, that's when the blood sugar levels start to drop again. So the insulin moves the glucose in the blood to the cells and tissues, which causes the glucose level in the blood to actually drop, which obviously then drops the blood sugar level. Now, the insulin's still in the system, so as long as the insulin is in the system, then the cells will absorb energy, and as long as the glucose and the glycogen are still in the system, then fat is not the primary source of energy. It's still the glycogen. But then we get the next stage where the blood sugar level actually settles, and that's between the 9th and the 11th hour of your fasting period. So this period is just a brief period, resting period, where the food has been completely digested, and so the body isn't producing insulin anymore. But even though the body's not producing insulin and doing the whole glycogen thing, creating more energy, the body still needs energy, because there are processes from the vital organs and the muscles and the cognitive processes that are still going on. So the body still needs energy. So this is where glucagon, I think it's pronounced glucagon, this is where the glucagon actually comes in. So the glucagon actually releases the previously stored glycogen back into the bloodstream. So remember, all the excess energy that was being created was being stored by glycogen. So now that's all being released back into the bloodstream. And during this process, the blood sugar level then remains constant, but there's also a constant supply of energy. Then the next short period between the 11th and the 12th hour is where we start to actually burn fat. And the reason we start to burn the fat is because the glycogen has now all been used up, and the body still needs energy, and therefore it starts to actually burn up the actual fat reserves and uses that for energy. But then we get into the most important part and the most interesting part. So first of all, you've got ketosis, which happens between the 12th and the 14th hour. After the 14th hour is when you hit autophagy. However, the process of autophagy does happen somewhere, or does start somewhere between the 12th and the 14th hour of fasting. So it's in this ketosis stage as well. So once this fat burning process actually begins, then ketones are actually, or ketones start to be produced. It's kind of a byproduct of the whole process. And these ketones are fatty acid molecules that are formed when the fat reserves actually are broken down. And the interesting part is that they actually provide energy to the heart, to the brain, and to the other vital organs as well. So through that process, they actually activate the nerve cells, strengthen intellectual capacity, and they also develop new cells from the brain stem cells. And it's this that actually creates or causes an increase in concentration and productivity during this time of fasting. But then we get to the autophagy stage. This is the part that I just find absolutely incredibly amazing. Autophagy actually comes from the Greek word autophagus, which means to consume oneself. And in this stage, we do actually consume ourselves, we eat ourselves, which sounds a bit strange and a bit kind of sadistic, but it's actually not. It's actually very good for you. It's good to eat yourself, and I don't mean chew on a finger or anything like that. What actually happens is that the cells actually start to process themselves. So the old cell compounds, or the so-called misfolded proteins, these are actually recycled and completely removed if from the system, if they're not actually required. Dead cells and things like that are actually removed from the system. So this clears out all the unwanted and damaged cells, and the body actually starts to self-heal. The cells can actually be completely replaced. And it's why a lot of people find that if they have injuries, especially with pain, and it's a type of pain that's constant, and medication helps to a certain point, but not completely. I've heard stories and watched a documentary about this. There was one woman who was having headaches constantly for years and years and years, It was a result of an accident, if I remember correctly. And she was on pain meds to try and manage the pain, but it wasn't getting rid of the pain. The pain was always there to some degree. And she started under supervision, obviously, because her fast, it was a water fast for 40 days or something. And she did the water fast for the certain period, and then she stopped for two months, and then she did it again, stopped for 2 months, did it again. And she reported that with each stage, the pain became less and less. It became more manageable over time, but eventually she had days where she went completely without pain, which she hadn't had in something like 15 years or something crazy, because the cell had actually, or the body had actually repaired itself. And this is why I find this whole thing of autophagy so incredibly amazing. I mean, we do replace our cells, all the time. Our cells die and we replace them, but it's this autophagy stage that is the stage where this starts to happen. So if we can actually make or cause this to happen more often, then we're going to heal ourselves from the inside out, really. But what we tend to do is just eat and eat and eat without giving ourselves a break or allowing our bodies to actually reach this autophagy stage, to switch over to it in order to actually heal the body. We're just constantly eating. So to actually allow the body to get to a stage where it starts to heal itself, I consider extremely beneficial. And there's no reason why, you can't be done. As I say, we get into habits where we drink our coffee with sugar and milk, and we have it first thing in the morning and before we go to bed, and we get up and we snack, or we might eat some. My father used to have a bowl of cereal, cornflakes, before he went to bed. That was just a standard thing for him, and it's very much a habit of a lot of people in the Western society, especially, where we're just constantly eating. The only time we're not really eating or consuming anything that is fatty or animal proteins is when we're actually asleep. So to get out of those bad habits and start creating these good habits is better for you, it's better for your body, and because it's better for the body, it's better for the mind. And if it's better for the mind, it's better for your magic, isn't it? So I think you can see why I wanted to talk about this, not just for your health, but for your entire magical lifestyle. There's no separating your life or your work life or your personal life or whatever part of your life from your spiritual life, your magical life. There's no separation. There shouldn't be. It's all part of one big whole, and your body, your mind, your spirit, your soul, your emotions, it's all part of one big whole. And if one part breaks down, all the other parts are going to be affected. So you've got to look after all parts in order to actually function properly and master yourself, which is the main reason for a magical lifestyle. So I'm probably going to start rambling at this point. So I'm going to leave that with you. Leave you to think about that, consider it, see if it's something you want to do. If you do, let me know, and maybe we can motivate each other to keep going. And I'll see you on Friday with another interesting video. On Friday I'm going to talk about working magic in the southern hemisphere as opposed to the northern hemisphere. And that's it for now. Cheers.